We've said that God is one, that there is one God, that we as Christians are monotheists. But we've also said that this one God has manifested himself in three persons, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Which leads us to our next point, which is that the doctrine of the Trinity is incomprehensible. That God is incomprehensible. There's a wonderful story of St. Augustine on a Saturday. It was the Saturday before Trinity Sunday, which is a Sunday in the church calendar where the church focuses on the doctrine of the Trinity and reflects on the Trinity. And Augustine was walking along the beach, really agonizing over his sermon that he would have to preach the next day, because he couldn't figure out, how can I explain the doctrine of the Trinity tomorrow when I preach about the Trinity. And as he was walking along, there was a child playing on the beach, and this child had dug a big hole in the sand, and they had a bucket, and they were running to the water and getting water and pouring it into their hole and getting some more water from the ocean and pouring it into the hole. And Augustine stopped and watched this child for a while, and then finally asked the little boy, what are you doing? And the little boy said, I'm putting the ocean in my hole. And that's when Augustine had a revelation that in essence he was trying to do the same thing. To try to explain the nature of God is like trying to put the entire ocean into a hole that we have dug. It's possible to explain the doctrine of the Trinity. It's possible to teach the doctrine of the Trinity. It's possible to affirm the doctrine of the Trinity. But it is impossible to comprehend God in his essence, in the greatness of who God is, in his complexity. God himself is incomprehensible. Think of it this way. You and I live in a three-dimensional world. But suppose there was someone who is living in a two-dimensional world to whom you wanted to communicate. Think of an 8-sided cube. Think of it like a Rubik's Cube, say. That's not all scrambled up. So each side of the cube is a different color, a solid color. And now you're going to try to show and explain this cube to someone who lives in a two-dimensional world. Someone in a two-dimensional world cannot comprehend the idea of a cube. And so you show them, the red part of the cube, the red side of the cube. And what do they see? They see a red square. And then you show them the green side of the cube. What do they see now? Well, they see a green square. And now you tell them that the red square and the green square are actually a part of the same cube. It would make no sense to them at all. They don't have the ability to comprehend what something in a three-dimensional world would look like. They can only understand those two dimensions. Well, God is like that. God not only exists in our dimension, but beyond our dimension, and is therefore beyond our comprehension. Now, scientists, I know nothing about science. I got as far as grade 8 science and then failed from that point on. But scientists tell us that we live in a multi-dimensional universe. I don't even know what that means, but I believe them. We live in a multi-dimensional universe, and they theorize that at this point, they theorize that there could be up to 26 different dimensions. So, and all we know are 3. Well, what can we say about God? We can say that God knows everything. Therefore, God must see everything. And if God sees everything, then he must be everywhere. And if God is everywhere, then he must be present in every dimension. God must be hyperdimensional. And if it does turn out that there are 26 dimensions, I don't know if there are or not, but if there are 26 dimensions, God is present in every one of them. And if it turns out that there are 26,000 dimensions, God is present in every one of them. God is infinitely dimensional. So we are limited. And that's why we can say that the doctrine of the Trinity is incomprehensible. We see the red square, we see the green square, and we are told that those two squares are a part of the same cube. I don't comprehend that, but I can teach it and I can affirm it. If God is comprehensible, if God were comprehensible, then really God wouldn't be God, would he? God would be the product of our own creation, something that is understandable, a being that is understandable. But because God is incomprehensible, he truly is worthy of our worship. In our three-dimensional world, we know nothing of single beings that are 3 persons. Right? In our three-dimensional world that you and I live in, there's no such thing as a single being who is 3 persons. But just because such a being does not exist in our dimension does not mean that such a being does not exist at all. It just means that we cannot comprehend such a being.